Hi, I'm Dr. Kristy Goodwin, a Neuro-Performance scientist, speaker, and executive coach who learned the hard way that chasing success can come at a cost. After burnout landed me in hospital, I made it my mission to help ambitious women who are done trading their health and happiness for high performance. On Spacious Success, I share science-backed strategies and real stories to help you flourish as a female at work and beyond so you can stop paying the success tax. But before we dive into this conversation with Amelia Phillips today, I wanted to share something personal. I first met Amelia when I joined one of her programs, and I can't remember when. It was back when it was Inner Vitality. I don't know if you remember when that was. And then I joined her Vitality 360 program. And since then, we've actually got to know each other a little bit better. You see, we are very lucky to be part of an awesome group. We're a mastermind group, and we get together with other female entrepreneurs. And she has been, Amelia has been a mentor, a coach, a friend, a colleague, and a colleague who really constantly stretches my thinking. I don't know if I've ever said that to you, Amelia.
You haven't.
No,
I hope in a good way.
It is. It really, I love friends that champion you, that cheer you on, and also challenge you, because I think we need that. We need those cheerleaders, but the challengers and the expanders in our lives. I think we would agree that we both share a love of science. We both love, I might say, have an infatuation with making data-driven decisions. And yes, we do often compare our notes on wearables and dissecting our blood biometric data. We are fun, I promise. That doesn't sound fun, does it?
We are sounding like a nerd fest already. Oh my goodness. Stay with us, guys.
Yeah, hang in there.
I promise.
Hang in there. Whether it's heart rate variability, sleep cycles, or cortisol management, Amelia is one of those people who brings evidence and elegance to everything that she teaches and that she lives. She is the epitome of health, not just in her body, but I also think in her values. She's generous, she's deeply grounded, and she's always encouraging me, and I don't know if she knows this, and the others around her to think better, to think bigger, to dream bolder, and to want more. And I love that. You are one of the expanders in my life, and I'm genuinely grateful that I have the privilege of sitting in your orbit. And I want this to be a reminder to you listeners. We all need wise women in our lives. We need collaboration, we need connection. And I think we've lost our villages, that's for sure. And so I want to remind you, who are the women in your life that guide you, that inspire you, and reflect back to you the next version of yourself? And for me, that is Amelia. So I'm thrilled that you have joined me. And I would like to say welcome to Spacious Success.
Oh, Kristy, thank you so much, darling. That was just such beautiful, touching words. And you haven't shared that with me before.
Well,
so
I will admit, sometimes in our mastermind sessions, I'm like, oh, Amelia's going to give me really direct feedback, and I know it's going to stretch me, but I can hand on heart say that I have walked away from those conversations a better person and with a bigger, bolder version of where I was thinking before I came. So thank you.
Oh, well, it always comes from a place of love and from an absolute place of knowing that you are so worthy, and I am so in awe of what you do every week with your amazing community and the women that you inspire. And I love that you're in a great position where you're up. Some days you're up in front of stages with, thousands of people in the audience, but then you're also working on that very intimate level with people as well. And I think that's a really unique position that you get to be in. So I'm glad that in some small, tiny way, I am in some way helping you do the amazing work that you do.
Thank you. You are indeed. And in fact, I overheard my middle son the other day. I had left a model of the brain in the back of the car, and I picked one of his mates up, and his mate said, "What is that?" And he's like, "Oh, it's my mum's thing. It's a brain. She uses it for work." And his mate said, "Oh, what does your mum do for work?" And my 12-year-old son said, "My mum plays video games all day and looks inside human brains." His friend said, "That is GOAT. I don't do that. I do a little bit more than that, but I do feel lucky, and I think you'd agree, and maybe we can start there, to find work that you genuinely love, like that is just innately part of your DNA, work that is a true passion. Tell us a bit about what you do, how you got here, the journey, because I think many of us look around at a lot of accomplished women and think that it was a clear trajectory, a very linear path. And from what I've learned from listening to you and other really wise women, is it's not always the case. Can you tell us how you got to where you are
No,
today?
you're so right. You're so right. I always feel like there is some kind of red thread that goes through someone's journey that when you start to connect the dots, it starts to make a bit of sense. But often to the person in it at the time, they're like, oh my gosh, it's chaos. I'm going here, I'm going there. For me, definitely health and women have been my red thread. And the I discovered a passion for the human body at a very young age. I've got some really strong memories. It's so funny listening to you tell that story about your son with the brain. I have a really, really strong memory, one of my core memories in primary school, of being in year 3 and the teacher bringing a lamb's heart into the classroom. And she had one of those plastic bowls, those kind of big, it almost looks like a newborn baby bathtub filled with water. And we're all standing around, half the class are squealing and ew, and that's disgusting. And then the other half, including me, are just mesmerized by this fleshy thing in her hand. And she submerges this heart and she shows us how a heart works and how she starts squeezing it and pumping it and showing us the ventricles and the atrium. And I just remember being absolutely blown away that I have this thing in my chest that started beating when I was 6 weeks in gestation and won't stop beating till I die. And so I think from that moment onwards, I just, bought all the books around the human body and then, started a career as a personal trainer when I was 17 years old and really just got so invested in behavior change and using the physical body to shift someone's state. And then, yeah, over my career, it's morphed in many different ways. So 13 years as a trainer in Australia and London. Then I bought a gym in Pitt Street in Sydney and I ran that gym for 6 years. One of the hardest things I've ever done. I always say it taught me more than an MBA ever would, but kind of shifted off the gym floor into ownership and management. I sold that and then I moved into digital fitness. And that was when I partnered with Michelle Bridges, who's the trainer from The Biggest Loser, and we launched the Michelle Bridges 12-week body transformation. And so that was an incredible ride, 10 amazing years. It was such a successful business. We sort of grew from the 4 of us co-founders all the way through to staff of 56. Wow. We transformed so many lives and I got to really see behavior change on a mass level. And so similar to you and what I was saying a moment ago about you're shifting between big audiences and then working one-on-one, as someone that is so invested in other people's health, as a trainer, you would fall in love with your client. And when they have a little win, you just go to bed so happy. And then I was seeing this on such a large scale. It was really just honestly such a career highlight. And then I thought after we sold that business in 2020, I kind of thought, I don't know if I can top that because it was just such an amazing wild ride. But I also had 4 kids in 5 years during that second 5 years of 12WBT from years 5 to 10. So I needed a bit of a reset and a bit of a break after such a wild ride. And we moved up to Avalon. And that was when I started tinkering with biotech. And I'd done a little bit of work with Apple and their Apple Watch. And I started to see this incredible behavior change unlock using data and data-driven, really small micro data inputs throughout the day. And something in me just ignited, a little bit like the lamb's heart. I just went, oh my goodness, this is unlocking behavior change. It started with me and drinking. And, I loved a good tipple, but when I started seeing what it was doing to my sleep, when I started tracking my sleep, I just didn't want to drink anymore. Mm. But, 3 months prior to that, if someone had just said, oh, stop drinking, I would have found it really hard. So, so then I've shifted and I partnered with the most amazing integrative GP, so functional medicine GP, to bring some of this really incredible data that we have access to now, thanks to technology and biotech, in blood biomarkers, in a whole bunch of functional health ways. And so that was, yeah, when we got together, and you started on Inner Vitality, which is our flagship program, an 8-week program using 55 key blood biomarkers. And then that has evolved into our Vitality 360 membership platform. So women often come on our Inner Vitality program, and then they move on to our membership platform, where we then offer a whole bunch of other functional tests. And it's just, I never thought 12WBT I never thought I would top that. But the work I'm doing with these ladies, the results we're getting is just absolutely blowing my mind. And it's real results. It's not about transforming your bikini body. We're talking longevity metrics that I can see are adding not only decades to these women's lives, but quality, healthy, happy years to their life. So I'm pretty pumped. As you can tell.
I can tell. And I love that you can, and isn't hindsight a wonderful thing, to be able to look back and see those common through lines in your life? Like, what have you derived pleasure from? Look, I love making data-driven decisions, hence why I'm a huge advocate for wearables. But can you explain a little bit more about when you use the word biotech and, some of the blood markers? How do you think seeing really tangible metrics? I often say to people, we cannot outperform our biological blueprint. We have some harsh constraints as humans, and I think many of us are living and working in ways that are completely incompatible with how we were designed to function and flourish as humans. That's why I think stress, burnout, and exhaustion are, really epic chronic levels of all-time high. So what does seeing your own data, just explain a little bit more about biotech and how seeing some of these things can spur us on to make more healthier habits and choices?
Yeah, look, I'm definitely of the mindset that you've got to measure it to manage it. If you are wanting to improve in some way, shape, or form, you need to have those data points. And up until recently, if we're talking about our physical health,
Yes.
we basically had a set of scales and a tape measure. And maybe if you were one of those poor unlucky people, you got pulled into a dinky little room in the gym and someone came at you with some fat calipers.
Calipers, yes. I was going to say also the genes test. That's a really key one for me, like your genes.
Yeah. Oh, hang on. Are we talking JEANS?
Oh, very well done.
Because the genes test is in, can I do up my button?
Yeah,
We can get onto the
100%.
genes test
Yeah.
as in the GENES
Well
test a little
done.
later. But certainly we've moved on from that. And what a lot of people may not realize or just have not yet been exposed to is the amount of technology that is now available to us outside of just the doctor's clinic that can be super helpful. So say, for example, the evolution from the scales, we've now got DEXA scans for those that are really into their physical body, where you can measure your body fat, your muscle mass, your bone density. That's an example. But then when we look at biomarkers, let's face it, we're in midlife now. It's not about getting a bikini body. We want to make sure that we're A, avoiding chronic disease, and B, we're nourishing our body in a way for optimal health.
Yeah.
And there is a whole set of amazing biomarkers through blood tests is the main one that we can use to track these. Now, at the very basic, when we go to a doctor is looking for disease. So you say to the doctor, I feel like crap.
Yeah.
Not losing any weight. I've piled on a few kilos. I feel terrible. I'm exhausted all the time. And the doctor goes, all right, let's run a bunch of tests. And one of two things is going to happen. They're going to come back and say, oh my goodness, your cholesterol is sky high. And, we've picked something up. You've got type 2 diabetes. Okay, they've diagnosed some form of a condition or a disease. And then, let's take some medication and off we go down that path. And that's wonderful. And that's why, we're living long lives, and the medical world is fantastic at diagnosing and then treating that disease. But then you might be on the other side of the fence where the doctor says, I've looked at everything and everything looks fine.
Fine never means fine. Even when your partner asks how you are and you say fine, we all know fine does not mean fine.
Yeah. And Dr. Yasmina, my business partner, taught me that the body whispers before it roars. And you don't just wake up one day with a disease or a condition. Your body has been whispering to you for a very long time. And so in functional medicine, we look at biomarkers through a different light. We don't use the reference ranges. So the reference ranges, when you get your blood test back and everything's in the green, so to speak, that's just populational norm. So it's basically the 80% of the population. However, it's not an optimal range. So in functional medicine, we look at what's more optimal for you. And we also look for patterns that might be appearing that says, oh, wow, you're starting to show some autoimmune triggering patterns. Early stages, you haven't been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, but we can see that. So, okay, let's go and either do further testing to get to the bottom of it, or we can actually support through, through lifestyle medicine, which means let's take nutrition, let's take exercise, lifestyle, like stress management, supplements, and we take a really targeted approach. And so that's what we mean by it's not meant to be overwhelming. And certainly that's why we love Inner Vitality, because we've just got this snapshot of markers. You get this test done, everything comes back in the green or in the optimal range. Fantastic. We explain what these key out of the 55, there's sort of 10 to 15 really important ones. And you might only test that. That might be a baseline. You test that once a year and you watch, you start to see any patterns developing. Or if you've got a few things that are out of that optimal range, you get targeted. What blows my mind, Kristy, you asked me earlier about kind of what I'm seeing out there, is so many women that come to us and say, my doctor said everything was fine. And then we measure their markers, and particularly their markers around energy. So ferritin, vitamin D, thyroid markers, a whole bunch of minerals as well. And they're all absolutely suboptimal. And for a lot of these ladies, it's not just one that's out of range, it's 4 or 5. And I'm like, no wonder you're exhausted. So to me, that makes it makes the journey easier, because you get clarity and you're like, okay, I'm not going mad. I can see. And a lot of the time when you get really targeted and you can identify what area is insufficient, then you're really targeted in your approach to restore balance. So you have more success, because you're not just trying to stick jelly to the wall. You're making a targeted approach. It makes you feel more in control. You're not overwhelmed, and it works. We see the results come through. So that's what gives me so much hope, and our ladies feel so much better for it.
I love hearing that. And I think you said a couple of things there that really resonated for me. And what I see with the clients I work with who use wearables, so we're not necessarily tracking blood biometrics, although with your Whoop strap, you can now import your blood work that you have had done, any sort of blood test you've had with your GP. Now, it's not necessarily calling in functional ranges, it's calling in those standardized ranges. But I think the really key thing with any sort of tracking that you do is it's precision medicine. Like, you're getting bespoke, customized, personalized insights into what your physiology really needs, what it's, low in, what it's high in. So you're getting very unique, specific information. The other thing that I really love about any sort of tracking that we can do, especially as it pertains to our health, is that I think you'd agree, habit change is often very incremental, and it's often invisible. And how many of us are making these improvements, especially with our physical health, but we may not see the numbers drop on the scales, or our genes might still be that one button that's struggling to close over. And I think that when you can start to, like what you said, what gets measured gets managed. And when you can start to track, you will start to see very quickly if you make some of these changes that you and Dr. Yasmina recommend, or if you start to implement the clients I work with, micro habits, you can start to see some of those improvements that we may not otherwise externally see. I often think of that, I don't know if you've seen, Amelia, that meme on social media of the miner, and he's just about to give up before he hits gold. He's really close to hitting gold, but he's turned around and he's got his pickaxe on his back and he's walking away. And I see that with a lot of people that are making improvements, changing habits, but because they don't get necessarily tangible, concrete metrics to confirm that, we often give up. And so I love, do you see that with the clients?
Oh my gosh. hearing you say that reminds me how often I want to pick up a set of scales and throw them out the window because to your minor
Yes.
analogy, the amount of times I've had a woman come to me and going, it's just so frustrating,
Yeah.
I haven't lost any weight and I don't know what's wrong. And they just want to throw in the towel. But then when we retest their markers,
Yes.
we see their insulin resistance score
Yeah.
has come right down. The inflammation markers have come right down. Their nutrient markers have gone up. And then they're like, oh, wow, that is awesome. And it gives them that
Spurs
impetus
them
to
on.
keep
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
because you realize that also when you start an exercise program and when you are changing your body shape, you do have things like your hydration levels
Yeah.
shift. You might be improving your lean muscle mass. If you're taking creatine, you might be adding very healthy water weight on there. So it's just, I feel like it's the difference between kind of hacking around with a giant mallet or David,
Yes.
Da Vinci working on David with his tiny little instruments.
Yeah.
Like you're just going to get so much more precision if you want to be a high performer and you want to have that beautiful spacious success that I love what this
Yeah.
podcast is about. You got to start to use precision instruments and
Yeah, you
it's
do.
not designed to be overwhelming. In fact,
Yep.
quite the opposite.
Yep.
It's designed to be empowering and calming and making you feel in a sense of control because you're like, yep, tick tick tick, I've done that. Okay, I know what my focus is and off I go.
Yeah. And it's that targeted. I think you alluded to it before. It's not about throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's not, I really deplore the word hacks. Like, oh,
Mm.
so many hacks online. You're getting customized, bespoke advice about what your body, what your physiology needs for optimal well-being. So I love that. And if anything, it saves you time because you're not wasting time on
Correct.
strategies and protocols and practices or vitamins that are
Yep.
completely,
Oh
redundant.
yeah, the
Yeah,
amount of
excessive,
your
expensive
vitamins.
urine.
Yes, 100%. Targeted supplementing is very, very different to just sort of grabbing a few things that off the shelf that you heard about on Instagram.
Yeah,
That doesn't work, and there's such a different camp around supplements a lot. But I can tell you that targeted supplements absolutely do work, and I see the difference day in and day out in the thousands of members that have come through our program. So yeah, I'm an advocate for targeted supplementation. Absolutely.
and I can vouch for that. One of the key things I got out of the very first round of Inner Vitality that I did was introducing, is it inositol? Did I
Yeah,
say
myo-inositol.
mine?
Yep.
And that made
Insulin
a
sensitizer.
huge difference to my insulin measures
Yep.
within, I think it was I retested because I like data. I think I retested about 4 months later. So within 4 months, simply adding that particular targeted supplement in, and my markers changed substantially. Now, had I never tested that, I never would have known. And
Yep.
chances are I could have tried a whole lot of other practices and protocols that never would have worked anyway. So
And you're a great example of someone who was feeling frustrated because you were like,
I was fine. My GP
yes,
said I was
your
fine.
GP said you were fine and you were not feeling fine.
Yeah.
And also you felt like you had this stubborn weight. And if we'd have just focused on the scales with you and just,
Yep.
said, let's just use the scales as your measure of success, then you might have been disappointed and there would have been absolutely no point focusing on the scales when you're showing some signs of
Yeah.
metabolic
Progress.
inflexibility, which you
Yeah.
were, and signs of
Yeah.
insulin resistance. Trying to have someone that's showing signs of insulin resistance trying to lose weight is like running uphill and trying to beat your flat hill, trying to beat your flat score. It just isn't going to happen. Let's fix that metabolic inflexibility first. And there was a whole bunch of strategies that we put together, including supplementing with myo-inositol, which
Yeah.
improves your insulin sensitivity.
Yeah.
And then you fix that, and then you'll see the scales improving at
Yeah.
a later stage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can attest to that. So you very discreetly mentioned before that you're a mum or a parent, I should say, of 4 children, 4.
Yeah.
You're a very accomplished person in your field. You work in, the media, tech, you have your own business. How has your relationship with your own body and your energy changed over the seasons of your life? And what are some basic habits? What are I often call them ignition habits? Like, what are the cornerstone foundational habits that have really enabled you to continue parenting and running the work that you do?
Oh gosh. It's a hard question to answer without saying the generic stuff around,
Say
sleep,
it though. Yeah.
exercise, the levers that I pull
Yep.
first and foremost are the cornerstone habits.
Yep.
So sleep, for example, I absolutely prioritize sleep. Exercise, I'm 5 days a week. I'm not an insane marathon runner or an athlete or anything like that, but and getting those 5 sessions in a week is really challenging, as far as I have to work hard. I have to say no to a lot of people. I have to
Yeah.
fight with my hubby. I have to overcome scheduling issues, but that is my not negotiable. And managing my nutrition in a way that
Yeah.
nourishes me but doesn't overnourish me, especially as I'm 47 and I'm going
Yep.
through perimenopause as well. But interestingly, what I've been reflecting on recently is kind of underpinning all of this. I would never have called myself a disciplined person, but I've really been reflecting a lot on that word discipline lately. And I realized that it actually is not the dirty word
Yeah.
that a lot of people associate. And I've been quizzing a few people lately, going, when I say the word discipline, what comes up for you? And for a lot of people, it's hard work,
Yep.
it's stress, it's pressure. But actually, I am reframing the word discipline, and I'm realizing that discipline has actually done the opposite for me, and it's given me space, and it's given me, I guess, a framework in which to run my life.
Yep.
And I guess I think it a little bit like, first of all, managing my schedule. I think one of the winning formulas I've learned over the years is the discipline of running a schedule as kind of tightly as you need to when you've got 4 kids in a
Yep.
business and all that sort of those kinds of pressures. So for me, I've realized that when I'm really disciplined
Yep.
with what I say yes to, and more importantly, what I say no to, it then gives me this space where I have the space to do the things that really matter. And
Mm.
that might be going to my kids. One of my kids is finishing year 6. So there's
Oh,
been
wow.
so many year 6 end of important assemblies and awards and ringing of the bells and dinners and all of that. And so I have learned that discipline has actually offered me space and freedom. And I think a lot of people don't tie, you would never think discipline and freedom, but that I think has underpinned. If I said, oh, what's my winning formula? Yes, it's sleep. Yes, it's exercise. Yes, it's nutrition, targeted supplementing, and emotional health. But underpinning all of that has probably been learning to be disciplined in what I say yes to, what I say no to, my
Mm.
schedule. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's really interesting you say that. So the other week I went out with some friends and there was a new lady that came along and my friend introduced me and she did the very generic introduction and then she started saying, Kristy is one of the most disciplined people you will meet. And I will admit, I was offended at first, a bit like your reaction, like, oh my goodness, it has connotations of being boring and monotonous and dull and,
Yeah.
serious. But on
Yeah.
reflection, I started to see that it is a compliment because there's no way I could have the freedom to, like exactly what you said, experience what I call spacious success, having an abundance of time, energy. I think that's a really
Yeah.
key thing,
Yeah.
and attention to do the things that mean, I often say success is living in close proximity to your values. And
Mm,
if you can
love
create
that.
structures and have the discipline to adhere to, because there's one thing to write up your weekly plan, it's another thing to stick to it come
Yeah.
Monday morning when
Yeah.
sleep looks like a better alternative. But to have I think the discipline is key. So I really like that. And it's a word, I don't know if I'd use the same word with my sons, but we talk about consistency um,
Mm,
and honoring your commitments. And I think
yeah.
that's such a really key thing. I also love that I often say the basics work if you work the basics. And I think a mistake so many of us are making, and I will raise my hand to say I'm guilty of having tried this before. I think we're all looking for silver bullets. We're looking for expedited processes. We're buying into the hacks we see on social media, thinking that there's a fast cut like a shortcut to success, or that there's one thing that's the silver bullet that's going to solve all of our problems. And I often think that we've bypassed all the basics. Like you cannot green smoothie or ice bath your way out of not getting enough sleep. Like you can't.
Or
I'm really
mouth
sorry.
taping, for
Oh, we
example.
do have that in common. My DMs blew up as I think I shared in one of our mastermind groups when I shared something about that. For the love of God, like please stop taping your mouth.
I know, I know.
Uh, yeah, I just go on. I was go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think for a lot of us, getting those basics right can be really challenging.
Yeah,
And so again, I'm all about this targeted approach. So for example, me and sleep. I have up until recently been that, you can sleep when you're dead and let's just burn the candle and it wasn't until I started tracking my sleep that I realized how important it was and also how different I felt and also how much I could influence the quality of my sleep. But did I suddenly start getting 8 hours of sleep 7 days a week? No, it took me bloody 18 months of testing and failing
yeah,
and trying things out. And so for me, for example, what really worked with my sleep, because there's one thing to there's what we like to call can't sleep versus won't sleep.
yeah.
Okay, so can't sleep is you poor people out there that are doing everything right, and then for whatever reason you wake up being at 3 in the morning, you can't get back to sleep. That's one camp, can't sleep. The other is the won't sleep, which is all the factors that are within your control,
Yeah.
the sleep hygiene, how late you stay up, the doom scrolling, all that kind of thing. And so focusing on the won't sleep, I made a pact. I was very intentional where I said 4 nights a week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I am going to be fanatical
Yeah.
about what time I'm in bed and what time I wake up. Because I wake up really early to train,
Yep.
I have to go to bed at stupid early.
Nana o'clock, we call it.
Yeah, I mean, and so if I want to be in bed for 8 hours, particularly on a Monday and a Tuesday night when the alarm goes off at 4:15,
Yeah.
I have to be in bed. It's got an 8 in front of it, I'm embarrassed to say. And so it's really hard when you're picking your daughter up from gymnastics at 7:30
Yeah.
but I've I was so intentional. I couldn't do it 7 days a week, but I would try to pick those 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And look what happened. My routine changed. I set up a little reward system for myself where I'd reward myself with a massage if I did 4 weeks in a row. And now it's easy and
Mm.
it's not difficult because I set up those scaffolds to help me shift that habit. And now here I am, and I can, hand on heart say that sleep lever is well pulled now, and I feel so much better for it.
Yeah. I often say sleep doesn't impact your well-being and performance, it dictates it. Like it is
Yeah.
the bedrock of our performance and well-being, and one of the key things that I think is often overlooked. And it's the first thing we often give up when we're stressed, um, or when we're under the pump. So I
Yeah.
applaud you. And I wonder, given that you work with, a demographic that's very similar to, I'm assuming, the listeners of this podcast, to the women that I have the privilege of coaching and speaking to at events, I wonder if you've seen a common denominator in the data that you see with the participants in your programs in
Mm.
terms of I mean, given that we now know, and we're all talking a lot more about perimenopause and menopause, thankfully,
Yeah.
what are some of the common denominators you see women struggling with? Because I don't think we talk about this openly enough. I think we've definitely shifted more towards it, but what are some of the common things you see women in their 40s and 50s, whether they're in peri or in actual menopause, struggling with when it comes to their health? Is
Yeah.
because the sleep conversation was the catalyst for that question, because hands
Yeah.
down, one of the first things that go with the women that I coach, if it's not unmanaged daytime stress that disrupts their sleep, what we
Yeah.
often see is changes in progesterone that
Yeah.
cause significant impacts or have significant impacts on their sleep. I just want
Yeah.
to say,
I'd probably pop it into a couple of different buckets. So I see a lot of insufficient micronutrients. So
yeah,
I see a lot of women that are really operating at an absolute subpar level. some really key micronutrients that are important for so many interactions in the body, things. So the ones I see that are really low and consistently low, and I'm just like, what is going on here in Australia, is vitamin D.
I was about to say that. That was one that came back for me on my first blood work that I was shocked. I'm like, I live in
Yeah.
Australia, I'm outside. How does it, yeah.
I know. And that a lot of people don't realize that vitamin D directly impacts our energy levels. And
Mm,
so and our mood, our emotional health as well. So when that's insufficient or deficient, we weren't just seeing insufficiencies, we see a lot of
wow.
deficiencies.
Yeah.
And I do love that one when it comes back low, because it's such an easy fix as far as, supplementing with vitamin D under the tongue, or, getting your 8 minutes of sunshine, sun smart per day. But I see this collection of micronutrients that are just suboptimal. So vitamin D, magnesium, ferritin, which is iron as well. We see some important minerals like iodine, which is really important for thyroid health. So that's one bucket where I see. And I just think if you're wanting to be a high performer and operate and push your body mentally, physically, and you're in such a busy stage of life, you at least need to have those micronutrients that are the building blocks for your hormones.
Yeah.
For every cell in your body, they need to be improved. So some of it through nutritional, targeted nutrition, like seaweed for iodine, for example, others through supplementation. The other bucket, if we're kind of looking at buckets that I see, is hugely stress. And I know, Chrissy, you did one of our stress tests. So we do a cortisol. It's called a CAR and diurnal. CAR stands for cortisol awakening response. And it's a 6 saliva samples over a day. And then you get this fantastic report. And I remember you came back as,
Mm.
do you mind me talking about the
No,
results?
go for it. Because I was going to say, I do track my stress with my wearable. So with my Whoop and Aura Ring, I can see what it suggests, when it's high stress, when it's low stress, what micro habits bring me back to a stress baseline. But what that didn't tell me was this pattern of stress, like the curves or the
Yeah.
architecture. So please feel free. I'm
Yeah.
more than
And
happy for you to share.
there's kind of four buckets of stress. When we look at this test, not all stress is the same. And so, number one, we have, women out there that are going, I don't know if I'm stressed or not. I feel fine. It's this idea of a frog in boiling water. Some people don't
That's,
realize
yeah.
how stressed they are, or
Yeah.
other people um, know they're stressed, but they don't know what type of stress it is, and the way we treat stress is different. I'll talk about the four buckets that we saw. So,
Mm.
in the cohort we did with you, we did 65 ladies. They all took this test. 5 women returned a normal, healthy stress response out of 65. And that blew my mind. I honestly didn't realize the prevalence of stress.
Yeah.
And so the four buckets are either healthy, the first bucket,
Yep.
5 people came back in that. Then you have a chronic stress response where there is no cortisol curve. Cortisol starts high in the morning, which usually means a rubbish sleep, because
Yep.
melatonin and cortisol work like a seesaw. So
Yep.
if cortisol's high, melatonin's low, obviously we need melatonin to sleep. So this was where you started high and you pretty much just stayed high all day.
Yep.
There was not this lovely, what's meant to happen is cortisol starts low. Think of like the profile of a mountain. It starts low, you wake up, it rises
Yep.
quite steeply for the first 60 minutes of awakening. And that's when, you survey the landscape, you go out and hunt for your food and whatnot. And then when you realize the world is a safe place, then your cortisol comes back down the mountain, and then it should track nice and low. Now, yours just started high and it just stayed high. There wasn't a mountain. It was just high the whole day, which is indicative of chronic stress.
Yeah.
Then you have the third bucket, which is a blunted CAR. So these, the cortisol starts upon awakening low. So you think, fantastic, good, starting low. That's got to be a good thing. But then it never rises. It stays blunted. It stays low all day. And that's a sign of adrenal fatigue. That's a sign of someone that is in burnout.
Yeah.
That person's may have slept well or may have slept poorly, but they're the person that do not talk to me till I get that coffee.
Yes.
Or 4 or 3 shot. And they're that person that absolutely has no energy, and that's where that's quite serious, to be honest,
Yep.
and something that needs to be addressed very differently to someone that has chronic stress. And the final bucket is what we call a dysregulated car, and this is where the
Up and
it's
down.
just all over the shop, and
Yeah.
it can look very different from it's just completely dysregulated, and usually late stage perimenopause or kind of untreated menopause can be where we see that dysregulation, or if we have severe mental health challenges. So where you're either diagnosed with severe anxiety or severe depression, we'll see those responses. And so I don't know, how did you, like when you saw that you were chronically stressed, was it something that made you go, oh, I actually do need to pay attention to this now?
Yeah, because my strap told me that. I just wanted to corroborate that there wasn't some
Yeah, okay.
anomaly or mistake in the whoop strap. So it
Yeah.
definitely confirmed. I also felt that. I mean, I knew that my sleep was being disrupted, and we often know that one of the surefire signs, and I see this consistently with my female clients, is that when they have elevated or sustained periods or chronic stress, universally, they tend to be the women that are waking up tired and wired between 2 and 4 a.m. and unable to go back to sleep because their
Yeah.
cortisol is beginning to peak as it should,
Yeah.
in those early hours of the
Yeah.
morning to hit its peak, as you said, when we wake up. But
Yeah.
because they're going to bed and for want of a better description, their cortisol cup is already full from that
Yeah.
elevated level in the day. When their cortisol begins its increase, it's when we wake up because we've got this overflow. The
Yeah.
other thing that I consistently see, and this is one of the problems with burnout, I often say burnout is a slow erosive spiral. It doesn't happen overnight. I feel like it's that Pantene ad from the 80s. It doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen. And so the problem with burnout is, as you described, often people don't realize. I mean, I was one of these people. I had no idea I was burnt out until I was put on a ventilator in a hospital because I was so exhausted.
Yeah.
And I had a very severe dose of COVID. But what I see with a lot of women is that because their body is their adrenals are no longer producing cortisol often,
Mm.
they don't feel stressed. So when you say to someone, "How are you?" often
Yeah.
we get, they actually say fine, and they
Yeah.
mean fine because they're not getting that surge of stress hormones like they once used to. Or we often see what we call emotional blunting. So if you say to someone, "How are you?" and they're in the throes of burnout, they'll often say, "I'm blah." It's not a
Mm.
very scientific word, but we've all been there when we're neither good nor bad, we're just blah. And so that blunting of emotions is another really clear sign, I think, that someone is in burnout. But hard
Yeah.
for us to detect ourselves, easier to observe in others.
I love that you say that. And it reminds me, I interviewed Osher Gunsberg on my podcast recently, and he says he's got a rule that if he says he's fine 3 times to people that are saying, "How are you? I'm fine, I'm fine." If he says it 3 times when he knows he's not fine,
Yeah,
that's when he has a checkpoint with himself.
I
And
love
I
that.
thought, isn't that clever? Because I had a tough morning this morning for a whole range of reasons, as we do. And I felt myself like smiling through gritted teeth as I saw a couple of mums on the school drop, "I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm
Yeah.
fine." And yeah, that's when it's just a moment to check yourself and say, well, hang on, I actually am not fine.
Yeah.
And I think with stress management, the other message I want to give is one of hope, is that it's
Mhm.
actually really, I'm not going to say easy to improve and to fix, because easy's not, doesn't give it the respect it deserves. But there is so many really small and
Right.
manageable things that we can do.
Yeah.
And that really make such a big difference to our stress levels. And I often use this analogy. I call it a daily breath, a weekly pause, and a seasonal restore.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, when you think about stress management, there's three kind of levels:
Mm.
daily, weekly, and then seasonally.
Yeah.
And so for stress management, like some of us fall in the bucket of only focusing on the seasonal fix. So I'm going to book a
Yeah.
retreat.
Yeah.
I love Billabong retreats just outside of Sydney. I have moved it 4 times. I've had it booked since the start of the year, and I've moved it 4 times. And so for a lot of us, it's like, if I just get to that retreat and I book that big
Yeah.
holiday, and Whereas it's important to fill those three categories. You
I
might
agree.
want to have the big reset once a season if you're
Yep.
lucky, but then the small daily habits of that breath work. And
Yep.
I'm a failed meditator. I'm the first, and all the meditators say, Amelia, there's no such thing as a failed meditator. I'm like, well, tell me what I am then, give me a label. But what I can do is I can box breathe. I
Yeah.
can, imagine a box in for 4 breaths, hold for 4 breaths, out for 4 breaths, hold. I can do that 8 or 9 times just before I go to sleep. When I have a bath at home, I love having a bath. Instead of sitting there with my phone in my hand and doom scrolling, I can just close my eyes and take some deep breaths. Every time I put my hand on the steering wheel, I love driving. I find driving relaxing, so I can take some deep breaths. And that's that daily breath. And then the weekly pause, if you're lucky, you might book a massage once a
Yeah.
week or once a month, or it might just be scheduling downtime and it might be binge watching your
Yep.
trashiest TV show with no guilt, no laptop next to
Yep.
you as you're just doing a bit of work on the side. So that would be my big takeaway for
Love
those that
that.
are trying to reset their stress is that daily breath, that weekly pause, and then that seasonal restore, and making sure you're doing something in each of those
Yeah.
buckets.
And I will corroborate that. When I realized I needed to really seriously tackle my stress, it was sighing. So 2 to 3 cycles of sighing. It was doing some box breathing. And it was literally going for just a stroll every now and then. The weekly resets for me was trying to fit in. I love reflexology. I have a friend who's a reflexologist, so booking consistent, they weren't weekly by any means. I would love them to be. But and as you said, like scheduling those things in, because what goes in the calendar we stick to. So
Yeah.
trying to put in those mini pauses, and then those larger breaks as well, because we often get anticipatory dopamine even when we see the girls' weekend away,
Oh, yeah.
in our calendars. And so I think the good news is, and the research, I love that research and science corroborates this, is that I call them piccolo breaks. So they don't have to be coffee, but I like the idea of a coffee analogy. So I call micro breaks piccolo breaks. They're
Cute.
small, but they pack a mighty punch.
Yeah.
And so those 2 to 10 minute breaks interspersed throughout our days, the breathing, the box breathing, the closing of our eyes, the standing out in the sun, the laying down. I
Mm.
just interviewed someone earlier and she said sometimes when she's feeling overloaded and she doesn't think she can get through to the end of the day, and she's a CEO, she lays down for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. And
Yeah.
she said her output, her mood, her energy are exponentially increased just by resting for 10 minutes. So I call them piccolo tall. So some days, a piccolo coffee won't cut it. We need the tall. So those weekly pauses, and then
Yeah.
the grande, those big breaks that we do have, some
Yeah.
consecutive days where we can reset. So I
Yeah. I
love
love
that.
that. Yeah. It's stress management is up there as one of those
Big.
cornerstone habits because it's not about the stress in our life.
No,
It's about how we respond
I
to that
agree.
stress. And it's unique for all of us. And it's
Yeah,
such a wonderful skill set to learn how to manage our stress
yeah.
effectively. And it takes intention, like you said.
Does. But not complicated. And that's, in my keynotes, I talk about how we have to learn to dance with stress. We have to build, I call it stress adaptability. And one of those things I'm sure you have had to do, being a parent of 4 kids, is to learn to dance with stress. I think we often assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as women, we often assume that women who seem to have it all together, they don't struggle. We often say that a woman has it all. She may not just be doing it all. Can you unpack? I think there's a superwoman myth, and I know you and I have had conversations
Mm.
offline prior to today about this. Do you think there's a cost of imposing that expectation on other women or using that term, your superwoman? I don't know if I have a visceral reaction when somebody uses it to describe me. Um,
Yeah.
any insights?
I think no no one feels like a superwoman. If
No.
someone's ever said it to me, it makes me feel a little bit like an imposter or a
Yeah.
fraud because I'm like, oh, if you had seen how I yelled at those kids in the car this morning or the nutritious lunchbox that I just packed full of packet foods, it it makes me feel a bit like a fraud. But at the same time, I don't want to discount people that are saying a lovely comment and it's coming from a beautiful
Great.
place as well. But I think that we are inherently really hard on ourselves. And, I think uh, that when someone gives you a compliment, even if it's not something that you necessarily agree with, I think it's important to sit with that for a moment and, just have a little moment to say, okay, well, there's something about me that this person is admiring. But just know that none of us bloody have it all
No one
together.
does.
And
Yeah.
no one does. And we are in the squeeze season. I call it the storm
Mm,
season of life because just like a storm, there's so many weather events happening at the one time, from thunder to lightning to
yeah.
rain to hail to wind. And we are in this insane storm season where, our family pressure is at its peak. Often from a career perspective, we're really pushing really hard physiologically. We're changing. We've got all these moving weather patterns happening around us. I think that a lot of us are really hard on ourselves.
Great.
And I think that, I feel so lucky to be surrounded by women like you and in our mastermind that are so supportive of that. And so I think we all have broken the superwoman
We
myth
ripped the cape
together.
off. We ripped it off.
Yeah. We ripped our capes off and said,
Doesn't fit. I don't
F
like the
that.
style.
Yep. 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 We're just doing the best that we can. And also, everyone's doing fantastically. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in awe of what us women
Oh,
accomplish.
aren't we incredible? I mean, you only need to look at childbirth. That's just the start of the superhuman, incredible talents and capabilities that women have. So I agree.
Yeah, and I think for if I look back on myself in my younger years, I often think I wish I'd celebrated my successes
Oh,
more. I used to just be like, yep, got that tick. Okay, moving on to the next thing. Oh, but I got that thing, but it wasn't quite what I wanted. I feel like now I am such a fan of celebrating whatever I can. And however, I even with my kids, I make us all like jump around the room and do a happy dance. If they come home from school and something happened, and
love
I'll do the
that.
same to my kids. I'll be like, guess what? I knocked
Yeah.
that project off. And I just am much more about let's celebrate and look how far we've come.
Yeah, well done. I think you've answered it, but feel free to share something else. I was going to say, what's one thing, big or small, that you do to experience spacious success? Is it celebrating the big and the little things? Is there something else?
Yeah, look, it definitely that's been a real theme for me. I
Mm,
think, and it's a lovely message. I think all of us can take a moment to just think about in the last couple of weeks, what's something you could really, that maybe you just let slide by, that you could actually
yeah.
sit and really celebrate. And, it can be as simple as playing a song that's your favorite song and or jumping around the room, like be a bit silly about it. Or you can reward yourself with,
Mm.
a massage or
Massage. Because
day
Amelia
spa.
said.
Yeah, I think that's one. And then the other one that I do a lot of is protecting my energy capital. And
Mm,
this idea about looking at my days and weeks and working out what makes an energy deposit and what
yes.
makes an energy withdrawal.
Yeah.
And so, for example, for me, exercise, no, it's not a withdrawal of
No,
energy,
I
although I
agree.
can crawl out of the gym sometimes. It's definitely a deposit. So another take home message I would have over and above celebrating is also really recognize what energy deposits you make
Mm,
and what energy withdrawals either other people make from you,
mm,
whatever that might be. It's unique for everybody. For me, like when I'm doing work that isn't kind of my zone of
yeah.
genius, that I have to work really hard at, like spreadsheets and things like that. That will be a withdrawal. So I make sure I balance it out with
Yes.
a deposit. So protecting that energy capital because we are energetic beings. We've got so much to give this world. But if we're running, if the tank's on empty, it's very, very hard to be there for others around you and to, yeah, like you say, that subpar operating at that,
Yeah.
what did you say? Was it a
Low,
low res?
low res powered down version of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Protect that energy capital so you're
Yeah.
plugged in, charged up
Love that.
24/7.
Love that. I encourage my coaching clients. We do an exercise called an energy audit, and we print off a random week in their calendar that's sort of a typical week. And then we color code we get them to put everything in their calendar for the week, everything from, doing the groceries to client meetings. And then we go through and we color code, and we put things that drain our energy as a red, things that are neutral. They don't either deplete us, but they don't, invigorate us as a yellow. And then green things are the things that give us back. And then we score them. So you get a negative score for your reds, and a 0 for your things that don't give you in the yellows, and the greens get a positive score. And obviously we want to make sure we're not having 3 consecutive days where we're in the red, as in negative energy. And we also look cumulatively at the week and start to look at where do we need to add in more green things? Are there things that we could turn from a red to a yellow? It's a really fun exercise.
Wow. What's the result on average now that you've done that with a lot of people? Are most people coming back in the red as their overall score? Yeah.
And it's interesting for them to see the cadence of their weeks. They're like, oh my goodness, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm in the red. No wonder Thursday and Friday, there's nothing left in the tank, and I crawl to the finish line. So
that's so interesting.
Just a really simple exercise, and it speaks volumes. And also it means we can really look, well, how can I add some more green in?
Yeah. What can I outsource out of the red? And then what can I make that? I love that exercise. I want you to do that with me.
I will do it with you next time. And we'll swap our wearable device data on the latest. Actually, I do need to show the Whoop latest feature with the blood work.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to see that.
So,
that sounds amazing.
We are going to wrap up. Amelia, where can people learn more about you if they've loved this conversation? And I can say Amelia is like this and so much more in her programs, incredibly generous, takes convoluted science and makes it really simple and palatable. If people want to know more about where they can find you and the work that you do, where are the best places for them to go?
I love Instagram. I'm on Instagram. So it's just my name. It's _Amelia_Phillips. I got a blue top on in the photo. So please follow me on Instagram. I put lots of interesting posts out, and I'm usually pretty...
You're pretty good on some funny memes. I like.
Yeah, I love a good Friday funny. I love a good Friday funny. And then yes, I actually do this fantastic vitality score that's a really easy and really affordable starting point. If you're sitting there feeling like you don't know what the source of your fatigue, and you're feeling knackered and you want to understand, I do this online. It's $29. It's an online vitality score. It's a questionnaire, and you'll basically get a report that tells you which of the 4 key health pillars is probably causing you the most grief. So it's a really good place to start.
I did that. I remember. The 360. Yeah, I did.
Yes, that's right. So that's really, if you're not quite ready for blood tests or ready for my inner vitality program, then that's a really good place to start. I can give you the link for that.
Please do. We'll pop that in the show notes.
In the show notes, yep. And otherwise, just my website, ameliaphillips.com.au, and that's got my Vitality 360 info on it for all the programs that we run with Dr. Yasmina. So
Brilliant. Well, thank you for sharing your wise words, your wisdom, your personal anecdotes and insights. And thank you to those of you who have listened or watched on, and we'll be back next time with more details and stories about how you can experience spacious success.
Thank you so much, Kristy. That was lots of fun.